Well, welcome everyone here in Zoom land and in the universe in general. I want to thank Master Sheng Yen, the founder of our center and the core of our practice, and all the foshers and all the volunteers who've made this possible and given me the privilege of sharing my studies with you. So today we're going to be talking about Lojong, and this is my 11th talk. So what I thought I'd do is, for some people who haven't listened to all 10 before that, and even if you have, just a very brief overview of what Lojong is. Lojong means mind training, and it's designed to let us see ourselves kind of inside and outside, looking to absolute bodhicitta, our Buddha nature, who we really are beneath all of the conditioning, poisons, educational difficulties, relationship difficulties, all these things that we have. We can see what's behind that, but we also don't ignore all these things that we're dealing with. So there's this combination of dualism and non-dualism that is at the heart of Lojong. And these 59 slogans are helping us wake up to our situation. So I'll just go briefly through the 7 points. We're doing the 7th today, but it would be helpful just to get an idea. The first one, of course, is to start at the beginning, and that means you recognize the preciousness of human life, right? We could have been born as a platypus or an avocado. No, that's less likely, but we're lucky that we are here now with whatever faculties we have. And we also notice that life is short, that things are continually changing. And we recognize that whatever we think our idea of success is probably doesn't work in the long run. There's really nothing that we can hold on to. And we recognize that we're responsible for our own actions. Those are the preliminary teachings. And then the second point is about bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. And in the slogans, which go from 2 to 6, actually, it shows various ways of what are really meditative practices that encompass everything that we study in Chan, from counting the breath, reciting Buddha's name, using Huato, and using silent illumination. They're not named like that in Lojong, but that's really what the practice is pointing to. Beginning with slogan number 2, to see everything as a dream. And it means, once again, not labeling things as dreamlike, but recognize our attachment. And what Lojong and our practice in Chan is really about is helping us to see attachments and sever them. That's really where we want to go. And then the third point, wow, I have this thing really small, is to better look up here. The third point is identifying what it is we're holding on to, and to turn all mishaps into the path. And there are a number of slogans that really are designed to let us be aware of how we're reacting in a given moment. And of course, what we're trying to do is change from reactivity to responsiveness. And that's what we're really going to get into in today's talk, to really see the mechanisms of the mind. And then there is a part which talks about making the practice your whole life. And this is really absolutely applicable for a Chan practitioner. Understanding the need for dedication, understanding habituation. The word in Tibetan is gom, G-O-M, and it means getting to know who you are, not who you want to be, and not who you think you are with your deluded thinking, but really to see the patterns that come up in your mind with a very clear perceptual acuity. That's what we're really trying to develop, this really pure awareness. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then there is an assess and extend, because when we're practicing seriously, we make a couple steps forward, a couple steps back, one step forward, a couple steps back. It's quite a process, the whole scale of practice. And we're really looking at that and seeing, well, is it working? Is it not working? Is there anything that we have to change? So we're continually assessing what we're doing. And then the next section, we're up to 6, is about relationships, and which is really 100% of our life, if you will, our relationships not only with ourselves, but with other people, and all the ways that we get caught up. And I often talk about slogan 32, which is don't wait in ambush. So you recognize how you're holding on to opinions and you're ready to unleash them on a friend, a neutral person, or an enemy, because it's something that you want to say and you're not really paying attention to what the system, the situation is in front of you. And then there's another slogan in that, which is don't get off on other people's suffering. Right? So you don't talk about wounded limbs, is the actual saying. And all of these kind of pitfalls that we can have about being a phony, pretending to be something that we're not, those are all the things that the Lojong is talking about. And it's really this complete practice, the 59 slogans, which was developed by Atisha in the 10th century AD, and it's practiced in all Tibetan practices, and many Zen teachers and now a Chan teacher adopt this teaching because it's so helpful. You know, it gets away from some of the abstractions that we find in our practice. And now that I've said that, I'm going to dive into a bunch of abstractions, but I'll try to make it as understandable and accessible as I can. So here we are, living at ease in a crazy world. That's Norman Fisher's description of the point 7. It's much more plain vanilla in other teachers. Pema Chodron calls it guidelines of mind training and advice for mind training from Khentrul Lodro Paye. By the way, I should mention that the teachers that I'm drawing on, of course, are Master Sheng Yen, and of course, and Norm Fisher, Pema Chodron, Kyabgon Traleg, Khentrul Taye, Lodro Taye, and Tom Campbell. So it's all in the mix of what I'm talking about. So that's how we begin. Now, this is what I'm about to talk about now is not in any of the 59 slogans per se, right view. On the other hand, you could say, and I am saying, that right view is part of all the sayings. And so I think this is really important because what the talk today is really about is right intention. And I don't see how you can understand right intention if you don't know what your intention is based upon, right? So this is the first of the 8-fold noble path, right view. And I just want to go over it so we have a kind of baseline that we're working from. So it's called Samaditthi, and in Chinese it's Zheng Jian, right? Literally right view. So people who have studied Buddhism on some level know that there is a traditional understanding of right view. I'm listening to myself on an echo here, which is kind of interesting, but I'm going to ignore it. Knowing what right view is traditionally is knowing what the Four Noble Truths are, dependent origination, the three characteristics, which of course are no self, impermanence, and the truth of suffering, the truth of the misapprehension of suffering, really. And that all that has the nature of rising has the nature of ending. Striving after worldly fulfillment is futile. Death is not the end. Our actions and our beliefs have consequences after death. And the Buddha followed and taught a successful path out of suffering. No one in any school of Buddhism would argue with those, I don't think, at base. But in the non-dualistic traditions, of which Chan is certainly a part, in Zen and other Mahayana schools, and perhaps in Pure Land as well, there's a different understanding of right view. And so that's one important thing, is the understanding of emptiness. And I realize as I'm going through these things, each one of the things that I've mentioned in passing is an hour or two lecture, but I'm assuming that people are pretty well versed in these things. So an understanding of emptiness, and an understanding that emptiness is not a view. It's kind of about the nature of the things that we are perceiving, as well as who and what we are and how we are. We're not who we think we are, what we think we are. That's key about emptiness. And the right view, of course, is not clinging to views. And what's interesting about not clinging to views is that you can cling to not clinging, right? So it's a really open mind that is just with this perceptual acuity that I talked about before. And we often speak in Chan about everything is mind. Sometimes that's stated as everything is not mind, and they're pretty much the same thing. And we get the direct experience of mind, which points to our nature and develops us into Buddhas. That's, of course, Bodhidharmas, or part of Bodhidharma's formula, which is also about ignoring the words and language and scripture. So a mind is Buddha, and we get insight into the interdependence of all dharmas. And another definition of right view, which is really very helpful, is the undefiability of awareness. In other words, what you're perceiving in a given moment, and what we like to say is what you're receiving, not actually being duped by your senses, that is undefiable. It is whatever you're seeing, like a mirror. Or at least you have the option of perceiving things that clearly. Generally, we're just caught up in our prejudice, and all I have to do is say Democrat and Republican. It brings up all sorts of things. So let's continue. One thing I actually want to read something that Norman Fisher wrote about how we often understand our practice and what people think about Zen. So he writes, it seems that resistance to systems and distinctions is a big point for Zen, which is really what I just said, when we're really looking at mind as not holding on to views and to concepts. And so the entire text of mind training is for the purpose of reducing self-centeredness and generating compassion. Norman Fisher's book is actually called Training in Compassion. And that's actually what attracted me to his book originally, because having studied Chan and Buddhism for 5 decades, especially in Chan, the compassionate part, which is at the bedrock of our practice, but it's not stated so explicitly. So Norm goes on to say, yet in Zen, it's said that there is no such thing as compassion because reality is already compassionate by its very nature. So there's no such thing as compassion per se, as distinct from anything else. It's a pretty radical view. And of course, I don't think he believes it, and I don't believe it either, but it is part of the rap that we can perceive. So why do we keep going on about compassion if there's no such thing as meditation either, since consciousness is essentially meditation already? Why talk about meditation or post-meditation or distinct categories? It's a good challenge we get from him. So he continues to say, this is the humor of the big joke of Zen, practice that one finds over and over again in the sayings of the old masters. Whatever you privilege, whatever you define and adhere to is always wrong and will be, because it always leads to a problem and a danger of holding on, whether it's meditation or compassion or goodness or truth or enlightenment. Whatever noble thing you want to know, experience, or aspire to, as soon as you privilege something, you preference it and make it a big deal, then there's always trouble. And whatever we designate as this or that, and that thising and thating is the heart of our dualistic tendencies. We should recognize that and not get so excited and bent out of shape by it. And so when we name things, when we use categories, it's really very helpful. How else will we have teaching? It's just we have to be alert to, it's a little bit like in Zhuangzi, when Zhuangzi says, praise be to the fisherman. When he caught the fish, he forgot the trap. And when Zhuangzi caught the meaning, he forgot the words. So it's really the essence of the teaching, which we are experiencing and assimilating. And that is something that can't really be conveyed. Anyone can experience it, but it can't be conveyed in words. So now we're going to take a deep dive into right intention. And let me explain why I'm going to torture you all with this. And this, of course, is when I have to introduce my my disciple, Zag. Some of you know, he's the one who disputes whether I'm the master or he's the master. And also, when I get into topics like this, which could be really dull and boring, and I happen to fall asleep, he wakes me up, right? So this is, just want you to know that he's looking after us and will appear from time to time. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. There we go. All right. So now we're diving into right intention, and we're going to talk about four things, I guess. First of all, what intention means right now. The kind of way that we're diving into it here is something you wouldn't find in Western philosophy. I shouldn't make a statement like that. I don't know all Western philosophy, but it's probably not quite the same as Buddhism, because we start at the core meaning of what an intention is, and that's cetana, and that's volition, your will to do something. The mental factor that directs karma, right? So when you do an act intentionally and it has some sort of a result, causes and conditions having some sort of consequence, that's generating karma, and that's what cetana does. And it's the raw mental push and that which moves or directs the mind. And in Chinese, it's yi, which is mind, thought, or intention, and sometimes se, thinking, considering, and intention. And this cetana is something that we all have, and actually in the Abhidharma and in the other systems of thoughts, it shows that Cetana is part of every single thought we have. There is volition, this kind of volition, all the time. But since we're dealing with looking into and moving away from our normal reactivity, we want to look at some other things that might explain to us a different way of understanding. So then we have the word sankalpa. So it's really interesting. The actual thing in Pali is sama sankalpa. Sama is right or complete, and sankalpa is this intention. But it's a different understanding of intention. So sankalpa is intention, resolve, volition, thought construction, mental formations, and it's also creativity. You know, this is something Jimmy Yu sometimes talks about this. In any moment, if you're really open and aware, then you can be creative by putting together what's actually in the situation, what is actually part of your resourcefulness, how you can actually help. So this is, sankalpa is about aspiration, perhaps it's even about inspiration. And the other thing that I thought I'd just put for people's interest is because many of you know of the 5 skandhas, which is the way we're put together of mind and body, or body and mind. Body is just form. And then the other 5 skandhas are sensation, perception, volition, which is, you know, our star today, and consciousness. And so that's kind of the big container that holds these other things. And I have a chart which will simplify it. Oh, is it, you know, I might, okay. I probably wasn't a little confused. This is right intention. So I'll just go over, perhaps if the slide wasn't up. I have a bunch of slides here on the computer. And once again, I'm just going to mention, since now you can see the slide, Cetana, which is the intention that is part of every thought, which is very reactive, and sankalpa, which is the kind of intention that has many more components to it. It allows creativity, it allows growth, and is not so determinate of karma, depending on how we are actually acting. And then, of course, samkara, mental formations, is our 4th skandha. So going to this slide, just, I don't know if I'm really simplifying things, but at least you only have 3 things to look at in this slide, which is Sheng, right? That's the 4th skandha. That's the aspect of our mind that makes things up, which takes what has been sensed and perceived and assimilates them in consciousness in terms of how you feel about it, your views, what you're going to do about it, how it becomes your mental environment, your mental architecture. That's part of the way that our mind, our samsaric mind, works. And then Cetana is the little part of that, the core driver, it says, that turns mental factors into karma. And then sankalpa, which is really the part of right intention. That's the part which brings in so many other aspects of our lives into what we're actually perceiving and assimilating and acting upon. So that's really, really important. So once again, I talked about right view, which is understanding the nature of our mind, our environment, who we are, what the world is, how we understand it, right? That's the baseline. And then I've just spoken about right intention, which is what we do with right view. So that's the first 2 of the Eightfold Noble Path. And it's really, really important in getting into the slogans in Lojong. And now, just as a breather, if you will, I have this slide up because I was listening to a talk by Master Ricard. He's the great French Tibetan practitioner who wrote a famous book on happiness. And he was addressing an audience, teaching them meditation. And he was trying to get people real in terms of what they can do, about how people talk about, well, I don't have time to do it. My life is so busy. And what he said is, well, do you have 10 minutes a day, right? Right. Just remember, I'm not talking about philosophy here. I hope I'm not talking about philosophy. I'm talking about practice. So Matthew Ricard is asking the audience, you have 10 minutes? And he looks around and he says, how about 10 seconds? You know, and Jimmy Yu talks about 5-minute Zen, where you take 5 different minutes at a particular time in the day and you become aware of your breathing or your body, just so you fall out for a moment of your normal routine. So Matthew Ricard started talking about perfume, and he made this comment that got a big laugh. Monks don't usually open up bottles of perfume, but he made this point that if you do open a bottle of perfume, the fragrance comes out, right? And even if you cap it, the fragrance is still there for a short while. And then he said, well, if you keep opening the bottle frequently during the day, and that, of course, is our practice, whatever we can do, eventually the air becomes fragrant. So I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind as I'm talking about what seems like these big overarching ideas. And what I'm really talking about is the minutia of our everyday lives. We don't live any other place but in the moment, no matter what our minds are dancing around. Okay, so now we go to the first of the activity that we're working on, which is number 39. All activity should be done with one intention. And I say, I don't know if anyone remembers, but when we were way back in slogan number 19, that was, there is just one point. And some of these slogans, like the one we're doing now, all activity should be done with one intention, sounds so vanilla, so plain, so boring. It's like you could read it and you could fall asleep, right? I was sleeping, just as I said, right? You could just pass over it, but I'm here to tell you how absolutely wonderful and profound this is when we get into it. So slogan 19 says there's just one point, and that slogan is about our attachment to ego. It's really learning about our attachment to ego, seeing how our attachment can influence our life in ways that we can see and many ways that we can't see. That's a really essential thing, and that doesn't really go away until, I guess, we reach very high levels of bodhisattva attainment, very high levels. So that's really important. This one, the activities that it's talking about are on another level. It's once you've been dealing with all of this about what we're caught up in our own lives, you start to like wake up and look around you and see everybody else. So the intentionality that we're talking about in this slogan is about aspiration, vow, awareness of other people. And a very simple statement which encapsulates this whole slogan is that may whatever arises in this moment serve to awaken me and all sentient beings. And this is, the flavor of this has been all through Lojong, like turn all mishaps into the path. And this is not so much preoccupied with mishaps as really opening up and seeking awakening, liberation, which is what Lojong is about. So this is really the relationship between what we want to do and what we actually do. I mean, think about how remarkable that is, if you will, because we're so caught up in what we want to do, we don't always know what we're actually doing. And this is kind of asking us to wake up to that, right? Because it's got activities and intention. The activities are what we do with body, speech, and mind. Intention is what's in our mind and what we're aspiring to. And you can look at things very plainly and matter-of-factly, which is helpful at first. One time, I'll never forget, Master Sheng Yen, Shifu said, we get up in the morning, we perform activities, and then we go to sleep. We get up in the morning, perform activities, go to sleep. Well, there's a good formula. If you want to put somebody to sleep, you just keep repeating that. But it's true, as long as we're alive. We get up, we perform activities, and we go to sleep. So we want to see what's going on during the time that we're performing the activities. So the warning here is that sometimes the attention is mistaken for an action or an accomplishment. Actually, Marshall McLuhan, the great specialist in media, had this phrase he called label libel. You say a phrase like enlightenment or practice, and then you kind of think, well, I know exactly what that is. I know what practice is. I know what enlightenment. I mean, I can define enlightenment vaguely, but it's really a warning about attaching to what the names we give to things. So this slogan says it's talking about all of our intentions, not just one of them or a few. So this is really about the continuous practice that I was alluding to with the perfume metaphor, that, you know, we're in this, we're in it to win it for ourselves and everyone else. And so we do what we can. And when we become comfortable with who we are and what we can do, since most of us can't run a mile in under 4 minutes, we're lucky if we can walk a mile during the day. So we have to really be comfortable with who we are. And so this idea of having one very altruistic intention throughout all of our activities is enormously important and is really in concert with Chan. And it is pointing to continuous practice. So it's non-dualism, dualism rolled into one. And your intention, of course, is to save all sentient beings, including yourself. That doesn't vary. But the activities, our lives, our everyday lives, that's a roller coaster, right? And I think most of us agree. We have good days and we have bad days. So anything can be an intention if you want to bring something into focus and look at it in detail. And that's a lot of what our practice is about. We can look at the origin of things. We can look at the aftermath and the effects and look at it in terms of whether it's valuable, wholesome or unwholesome, and look at it in terms of the nuances, the little things we might be missing. And, you know, there's an interesting sutta in the Pali Canon where Buddha is talking to his son, Rahula, and he's using a metaphor of the mirror, which you often hear in Zen. Mind should be like a mirror and thing like that. This is different. He's talking about a mirror as self-observation. So he counsels his son, before you actually engage in activity, look at what's going on. Look into the mirror of your mind, let's say. Look at that. While you're engaged in the activity, also look in the mirror And after the activity is over, look in the mirror once again to see what happened. Was it what you wanted to do? Were you causing help or harm? Really being aware at all the moments. Once again, that's what this slogan is really talking about. And you see, was I misguided or was somebody misguiding me? And, you know, what we're trying to do is to really seek liberation. So we want to not turn away from our problems. We want to look into them. And of course, Shifu has this phrase, you know, of recognize it, face it, manage it, and let it go. Once again, which is enormously profound, not as a set of statements, but as a practice, as an activity, rather than just sit there and moan and weep. I remember when Eleanor Roosevelt died, Adlai Stevenson said about her, she would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. And that's kind of the sentiment that I'm talking about. So any intention that sounds like one might sound like one thought, but really look into what's going on in our mind, and there are many, many components. One of the things that Simon Child and Rebecca Lee talk about is let it through, let it be, and let it go. And in that process, let it through, of course, is there's something in your mind, you really recognize it. This is very much in accord with what I just said is Shifu's formula. But then the let it be, if you really look at what has happened to a thought that starts to disperse, there are many components of it. And of course, there are things that made the thought come up in the first place, which you might not be aware of. So we're really maintaining a practice and trying to act on a practice that is really settling down, going to the deep, deep roots of our experience, the way our minds work. And so when we are acting like this, then karma doesn't have the same power that it does. We're not acting mindlessly, we're acting mindfully. And I'm not saying that karma disappears, but we can certainly lessen the potential harm. And of course, we're dealing with the karma that we have received, whatever is coming up. Sometimes people call it fortune or happenstance or whatever, but whatever it is what is happening in the moment. And the more skillfully that we work with the things that we are confronted with, the happier we are and everybody else we deal with is. So this is recognizing our constructed reality, our fabricated ego, which is really a rather remarkable thing even to consider. Really, if you're sitting there and just to hear somebody say, well, you're not really who you think you are. Your thoughts are inaccurate. I mean, I'm not saying that about whatever's going on in your mind, but it's an interesting thing to contemplate, because it's really hard to keep your mind focused and to know what you're focused on and to see why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, that's what we're really talking about, not just practicing mindlessly. And I read recently there's a very famous passage in the Platform Sutra where a monk named Fa Da comes up to Hui Neng and says, in effect, I have recited the Lotus Sutra 3,000 times, which is pretty formidable. It's like 65,000 characters. And he said 3,000 times and I don't get it. And Hui Neng says, in effect, well, you're reciting it, but you're not paying attention to what you're reciting. Just having words go through your, come out of your mouth is not really practicing. Even though it feels like what you're doing is right and holy or whatever, but it's really important to engage with the practice. And that is the bottom line of what this slogan is about. And so this is the self that we really have deep within us, our true nature, is not making an obsession about things, is not engulfed in anxiety that we, and certainly I certainly can be in lots of different times. And then there's this process of how we first receive an impression of things, which is kind of the imprinting. And then this could be certainly something traumatic or just something you've learned. And then that goes deep into our mind. It's called a seed, and then it matures. It ripens with all the other causes and conditions. And then some factor happens. You see somebody who wears a shirt like somebody who you really didn't like or had a really difficult time with, and that triggers a memory. And then if you're not careful, you can react to that thing which has nothing to do with the situation you're in. So actually there's an Abbott and Costello routine. That Abbott and Costello, two comedians that were active in, I don't know when, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Costello, who's the short, pudgy guy who's kind of the butt of the jokes, is walking on the street, and a woman comes up he's never seen before, and she slaps him in the face. And he says, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "You remind me of someone I don't like." And she walks away. Now, think about it. You know, we could do that a lot on a daily basis, on very, subtle ways, and not even notice it. You see somebody who has a particular logo on their t-shirt or drives a particular car, right? And very subtly, oh, that person must be a jerk, whatever it is, right? And you don't have anything to corroborate that. But you do have these imprints in the mind, these things that can be triggered and don't have to be triggered. That's really very important. So this kind of intentional awareness that we can maintain will really blunt the arising of karma, and so we can really get through things much more clearly. So now I'm going to just sum up what some of the teachers I'm using said. So Pema Chodron said, "There's nothing substantial in our mind, yet we make it into a big deal." Something to think about. Nothing substantial in our mind. I assume most of you had breakfast. Do you remember what you had for breakfast? You certainly don't remember every bite of what you had for breakfast. It's like gone, not to mention what happened yesterday or last week. So when we breathe in and we breathe out, we do whatever practice we have to do, and we feel resentful or we feel happy, we can drop our attachment to it. Resentment is uncomfortable. We certainly don't like it, and we certainly don't want to act on it. And the happiness is generally fleeting. Whatever wonderful feeling we have, it's not going to stay for whatever reason. So through all of our activities, whatever we do, we're really trying to wake up. That's what the slogan says. All activity should be done with one intention. And everything in our lives can wake us up or put us to sleep, right? What? Yeah, see, he does listen, right? With one left ear or right ear. With this ear, he listens. Okay, just mind your own business. So it's up to us to wake up. Shunryu Suzuki said that enlightenment is always at hand, any given moment. Actually, another anecdote. Zen master Ling Yun was a disciple of Wei Nong. For 30 years, had looked at a village across from the mountain that he was living on, and in the spring, he would see peach blossoms blossom. This is in Dogen. And so one day, after doing this for 30 years, he looked at the peach blossoms blossoming, and he had a moment of great enlightenment. So this is one of those koans, if you will, that is really puzzling. What happened? He's seen this all the time, for years and years, every year, everything the same. And then all of a sudden, something happened. Well, what was happening was his practice had been maturing. So it's not so much that if it had been a peach blossom or a cherry blossom or a particular hill, that was the point. The point was the inner transformation that had been going on unnoticed. And this is our situation too, whether we know it or not, right? The practice is sort of working in us. We don't feel like it a lot of the times, but it really is. And we read these stories of people who wake up, and that's what we're here for. Norm Fisher's commentary is, he gives this kind of way of going through the day and applying what is happening to everyone around you. So, may I have breakfast this morning to nourish all beings? May I go to the toilet this morning to purify all beings and free them from what's inside that? And what should be eliminated? May I walk up the stairs to rise up in goodness with everyone, walk down the stairs to deepen my commitment to truth for the benefit of others, leave the house to go forth to do some good for someone else, and return home in the hope that all beings will one day return to their true home, right, who we really are. Whatever we do unselfishly with the spirit of dedication of our activity to others. And it's hard to keep up, but we keep trying. And so as you listen to this, I know I actually sometimes listen to what I'm saying. So it's an interesting habit. You sort of think, well, all right, come on. I don't do that. I can't, I'm going to try it. I'm going to wish for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then something's going to come up on my phone, and I'm going to read about something in the news. I'm going to forget about all the sentient beings. I'm just going to concentrate on what's in the palm of my hand. But that's sort of where we are in the moment. That doesn't negate anything that was said. And you have to be careful of having the thought arising, well, I can't do this. My mind doesn't work in this utterly beneficial way. But the point is, like the perfume bottle, anytime you remember and sort of step out of the moment in the way that you were stepping into the moment is really, really helpful. And Caban says the purpose of the scriptures and the treatises is to attain liberation. And for this, it's necessary to subdue self-grasping. So he's putting in the slogan 19, which is all about self-grasping. And this slogan, number 39, all activities of study and reflection and meditation are for the sake of subduing self-grasping. And Kentrol Yoga simply says, make all yogas one. All yogas are all activities. Imbue all practice with positive qualities. This is really quite wonderful. They're just slogans, but they're things that can be contemplated. So let me see how we're doing. All right, so that's slogan 39. I'm not going to get through all the slogans today, which is fine. I think it's more important to do these things properly. But this next one is the flip side of that slogan. Correct all wrongs with one intention. So this is really following through with what I just said. We don't act the way that we would like to act in many situations. As I think that's true of most of us here. I don't want to praise or condemn anyone without any knowledge, but I think most of us have things that we work on. So this one, I like to call this the antidote to the antidotes, right? And actually, the slogan number 4 is "Don't attach to the antidote." And the antidote is this idea that we're all fired up with correct all activities with one intention. And then we find that it's just not quite happening. So what this slogan is showing is that intention has not died because it's not turning out the way that you wanted it to. The intention is very much alive. So we have a thicket of views. That's a phrase the Buddha talks about. And unwholesome intentions and partially wholesome and wholesome intentions. We're a big mixture of things, and we're continually making mistakes and errors. And this slogan recognizes that we still have poisons, or you wouldn't have to be reminded to act in a particular way, and you wouldn't be here. Right? You'd be sitting where I am, although I have lots of poisons. But it's really, really helpful. And so you're practicing and recognizing and transforming these wrong intentions. You're looking at them, not turning away. And when things do fall apart, it's not the end of the game, because you can transform these things through the 4 proper exertions, which I have up there. And I think the way, let's see, what I'm going to do is these 4 proper exertions and then something from the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment. So I think that my topic will be pretty uniform today, which is good. I often put in too much information, which I still may have been done now, but at least it'll be just right view, right intention, and then 2 slogans, which are exceedingly important. These are the slogans that begin point 7, living with ease in a crazy world, right? Really going back to our core and understanding what motivates us and how we act. So just briefly, the four proper exertions. And that the exertions, of course, are in line with our cetana and, more importantly, with our sankalpa, with our creative intention, with our aspiration, with our inspiration. So we prevent the arising of unskillful states, right? I feel that this desire to steal a couple of Krispy Kreme donuts is arising in my mind. So I'm not letting it go in. I keep it at bay, right? So I'm preventing, keeping my mind as clear as possible. So that's, but I probably have already unwholesome thoughts that have crept into my mind one way or another. So I can identify them and abandon them. So the first one is to prevent things from coming in that shouldn't be there. The second one is to recognize things are in the mind and to abandon them. And with the next thing I'm going to talk about, I'm going to show the subtlety of what that abandoning is about. Then we are cultivating the arising of skillful and wholesome states. And it's really important to understand this idea of skillful, because one of the ways of looking at how we progress in our practice is that we're continually acquiring new skills and more ways of being helpful to ourselves and other people. So that's the third of the 4 noble exertions. And the fourth one is maintaining and increasing these skillful states and activities and intentions. So there's a real complexity and a real simplicity. It's very interesting, right? Correct all wrongs with one intention, right? It's just the one intention. That's It's our Buddha nature, ever present, always active. We're not always listening to it. And these things are percolating up through our minds in different ways. Some things are giving us more problems, some are less. Some things we're lacking and we're not noticing that we're lacking, but we can try to open up to it. And this is really what's so wonderful about the practice. We're given all of these tools to work with, and they really will bear fruit. I don't know what kind of fruit, whether it's bananas or strawberries or raspberry, but some kind of fruit we're going to get. All right, so now I just want to give some nuance to the way that we can practice. So here, this is from the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, and these are the words of pure wisdom, the Bodhisattva. And I'm just giving the essence of the teaching, these four lines. And I once gave a talk here many years ago, just on this section of the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment. And I think this is really good in refining intentionality and practice and the underlying intention, aspiration. So it begins with worldly man, right? Worldly woman in our version also. All bodhisattvas and sentient beings in the Dharma ending age should at all times not give rise to unskillful thoughts, right? Misguided. This is the issue with technology. It's like teeny on my screen. Anyway, but that's the idea. Also, notice how it says the Dharma ending age, right? And I'm assuming that the Buddha wasn't reading newspapers today, right? Some of us think it's the Dharma ending age. This has been something ever present since practice began. People were worried about the world ending. But this passage is predicated on, based upon the kind of aspirations and intentionality that I'm talking about. This is a serious practitioner. So the first line of instruction is don't give rise to unwholesome thoughts, misguided thoughts. So you would think that, well, okay, that's it. We're finished, right? But then what happens is the next one says, yet when that deluded mind arise, they should not extinguish them. So if you think about it on a logical level, or a certain logical level, it doesn't make any sense. It just said that you don't give rise to anything. But now it's saying when they arise, don't extinguish them. Now, of course, I just have a very literal mind. Of course, the understanding is like in the four exertion. There are already unwholesome states in our mind, and those are going to give rise to unwholesome thoughts. But then it says don't extinguish them. Well, that seems a little odd, right? We don't want to attach to our thoughts. So the first thing we have is like, let me get rid of those rotten thoughts. I'm going to take a mental blowtorch and erase them. And actually, when I teach meditation, I often find that people, before I start, will say, no, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind of thoughts. And that is really not the understanding. The understanding is about attachment. And if you see a thought as a projection of your mind, there's nothing to get rid of. So that's why it's saying that don't bother to extinguish them. If you do try to extinguish your thoughts, then you're getting in more trouble. You're going to give rise to more thoughts. You know, the thought comes into my mind. I want to extinguish it. I can't extinguish it. Then I give rise to, boy, I'm really stupid. I can't do this stuff. And this is hopeless and that's hopeless. And then I start spinning out of control with feelings of anxiety and uselessness, right? Just from a thought about a Krispy Kreme donut that comes in my mind, right? So you don't do that. And then the next one is yet when in the midst of diluted concepts, they should not add discrimination. So that's further refining the issue. Noticing how easily we can be sidetracked, right? So I'm following the directions. Thought is coming into my mind, and then I probably had a tendency to like, oh, I want to get rid of that. But I've listened to the instruction, so I'm not getting rid of the thought. I'm letting it through, and now I'm letting it be. But then I'm noticing, wow, I didn't really attach to that thought. I'm such a good meditator. Let me pat myself on the back because I didn't get caught up in that thought. Right. So this is another kind of discrimination, right? And so then amid this non-discrimination, don't distinguish true reality. Further looking at the ways that we can fall into the wrong path, into attachment when we don't even know it. So I have had this thought arise in my mind. I had the ability to not try to extinguish it, and I wanted to say to myself, boy, am I really a great meditator because I didn't extinguish it. Oh, but I'm not falling into that. And then I'm sort of with my mind open and thinking, well, I'm glad I didn't do that. I'm glad that this is practicing. I'm not, those thoughts were illusory. My sitting here, my body, that's all real. I'm very clear about all that. And I'm not generating any thoughts at all. So once again, I've fallen into this trap of distinguishing things when I thought I was not distinguishing things. And so let's see how, all right. So I guess I'll end with this picture of, this is not my high school picture, by the way, just in case anyone thought that it might be. This is Manjushri, and he's holding the sword of wisdom that gives life and death, which sounds really strange. So why would he, well, first of all, why would he give death? Why would the sword give death? The death that the sword is facilitating is the death of ignorance, the death of attachments, the death of unwholesomeness. That's the thing. What he's really talking about is the great death, dasa. That's what the sword can do when it cuts through ignorance. Everything we've been talking about today has been cutting through ignorance. Sometimes, on Sesame Street, they used to say, this program was brought to you by the letter L and the number 9. So this Dharma talk was brought to you by ignorance and sponsored by non-attachment and Manjushri's sword. So that comes down cutting off our ignorance. And that process of cutting off the ignorance is giving life to our true selves, to our true Buddha nature. And you could look at this as a double-edged sword. You could also look at it as a single edged sword, cutting off ignorance, cutting off not understanding of right view, which is where we began, really, right? So right view is something that you begin with on the path, and right view is what you end up with on the path. But in the interim, your view and the whole process keeps changing all the time. So I'm just going to give, well, I think I've gone slowly enough, just talking about right view and right intention. And we covered two slogans, really. All activity should be done with one intention, and correct all wrongs with one intention. So, you know, the activity can be a wrong, or the activity can just be an activity. So we can be really clear about what we're doing. I mean, that's what our practice is about. Whatever names you want to use for what systems of practice we use, whatever meditation methods, whatever schools of thought, we're really trying to develop our perceptual acuity, our calm, our thoughtfulness, our awareness of other people. And sorry you didn't get to, I'm still sleeping. All right, so he was still there listening, and do you approve or not approve? I haven't made up my mind. All right, so the jury's still out, right? That's the point. But hopefully this was helpful to a lot of you, and you, yes, right? Okay, I don't want to leave you out. So I want to thank you all for listening and you know, giving me this opportunity. And we have time for questions and answers. Bob. Yes.
Slogan, because I was in advertising. That word slogan, when I hear it, I feel mistrust almost. Like, I feel like, hey, here's a slogan. Here, it's like a little bit like a shortcut I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else would replace it.
I totally agree with you. And, you know, things go better with Coke. And Pepsi. I don't want to, no favoritism here, but those are slogans, right? Now, I mentioned this in earlier talks. It just so happens, and this is a kind of information that, I mean, it might be useful, but people generally don't know this, that the etymology of slogan comes from Scottish, and it means a war cry. So this is not just, well, you know, love the world, Scottish. Yes, it's a Scottish, you know, let your fancy flow. There are all these kind of slogans. This is really, these things are really serious. And you were in advertising, I mean, maybe dictum, you know, needful things for attention. The driving force, numbers of driving force. I don't know what to do. You're right. It's not a great word.
That's the word they use on the title of the book.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They're always called slogans, and but remember, Atisha, who invented this in the 10th century, didn't have an advertising or marketing department, so he just came up with guidelines. You know, we have precepts, you know, and precepts are often understood as guidelines because they're not commandments. These are not commandments either. These are heads up. Which is also not a really strong martial phrase. But thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, the slogans. You know, we have koans. A koan means a public case, but because of the way they're presented to us, we can use them as the center of our meditation. And these slogans can be used like watos or koans. And practitioners who are really practicing Lojong may take one slogan and use it for a week or a year, right, as the basis of their practice. And yes, if you have any ways of fixing this, let me know. Okay. Anybody else with your question?
First of all, I like very much the choice of the word slogan, because I think we're at war with our ignorance. So we've got to go to the core of it, and slogan is the best possible word, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for emphasizing it, first of all. Second, I like very much your pedagogical device that you for preaching, because I noticed for myself when I got carried away with my thoughts while listening to you, and I was listening to you quite attentively. That guy told me how to wake up from the lack of thoughts.
Oh.
And switch to reality. And third, I think that the concept of samkalpa and intention implies layers. And there are multiple layers that I can feel.
Yes.
And one of the layers is just basic struggle, instinct for survival. Basically, it's animal instinct. And I was thinking why we stick so strong to our sense of self. And I see just fear behind this, fear for our life, fear for the peace of the planet, whatever fears we can have, for instance. And maybe if we struggle for getting rid of attachment to self, it also includes our struggle for fearlessness, for being fearless. So what is your opinion about this?
Yeah, well, no, I agree. And the things that really affect us so much are our fears and our hang-ups. There's a real tendency for us to not even see them. Right? And if we do see them, we go, right? We really don't want to deal with these sort of things. And that's true. That fear and survival, self-preservation is really at the heart of cetana, of our intentionality. We're really, it's me first. Everything's about me, and I want to be first in line. I want this. I want that. To protect myself, to gain status. The more status, the more money, the more fame I might have, the more I might feel protected, or the more I might feel insulated from the fear that you're talking about. It's really hard to see that fear and to admit it, because we're brought up with it in a way. We're made to mind our manners and to adhere to what teachers say, even if we think it's ridiculous. And we have to, there's this chirku in Chinese. We eat bitterness. We suffer a lot because of all this. And well, that's what but that's the road. I mean, that's the road. But it doesn't have to be as intimidating and unscalable as we think. If you're in the ocean and a big wave is coming, the best thing to do is to dive right into it, not wait till it knocks you right over. And what you talked about, getting back to reality, I mean, is really what important. And I remember there's this movie, 1,000 Clowns, where it's an older man and a younger boy, and the little boy says to the older man, who's very fanciful, he said, "Let's get back to reality." And the older man says, "I'm only going as a tourist." So, and that's, I love that line, because I really think I've been a tourist in reality for a long time. We're really trying to check into the hotel of reality, right? And not just wander outside of it. But thank you so much. That's a wonderful observation. Sure.
Any participant online join the Zoom if you have question, you can also unmute yourself and ask the question. Anyone online have questions? You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Anyone here? Then it's gonna be my chance.
Okay,
if you go one slide above it, one slide above this one.
Oh, go back? Okay.
Yeah. You give us more explanation for the last sentence.
Oh,
Amidst non-discrimination, they should not distinguish true reality.
right. So it is very difficult, right? So in the Lankavatara Sutra, it talks about dharmas and non-dharmas. So a dharma is anything that has that is produced by causes and conditions. We use phenomena a lot. That's what a dharma is. But a non-dharma is, the traditional description is the hair on a tortoise or the horns on a rabbit. My favorite one is the chipmunks that sell insurance to hippopotamuses on the planet Jupiter. That's not real, right? I'm pretty sure the space voyager is not going to find that. So the things made up out of the imagination, those are non-dharmas. What it says in the Lankavatara is that dharmas and non-dharmas are the same thing, right? It's hard to wrap your mind, no pun intended, or a pun intended, about that, but it means that we're continually engaging with the world inside and outside. And now, to live our lives peacefully and helpfully, of course, we have to distinguish, our wishes, what's most useful, what's wholesome, like the four exertions. We have to be clear about that. But on this grander scale, whatever is happening in mind. So in the poem Song of Mind, the first line is one dharma has never arisen. In mind, there has never arisen one dharma. In other words, I just define dharma as something that's the product of causes and condition. The table, those chairs, the ceiling, these were all built. These all came from somewhere. Yet that line says nothing came from anywhere. And this goes, so there's also an issue in Buddhism of, where does this come from? Well, in Tibetan teachings, and maybe in the Avatamsaka Sutra, this idea of non-causality, right? That things are they're not non-arising, right? And that's actually on the eighth bhumi, right? I don't know if I can remember the Sanskrit, but it's basically the confidence of non-arising. You've reached a state of attainment where everything is in a state of equipoise. There's no coming, there's no going, there's no staying. Now, I personally am talking about this metaphorically, right? This is not necessarily the way I experience the world, but that is what I can see that the teachings really point to. So that last line there says it's giving you a heads up, another slogan, if you will, saying, really look deeply in your mind. Is there something that you're holding on to, which is actually beyond language in a way, that dharmas and non-dharmas are the same, that what you think is real and what you think is unreal is not accurate. And really easier way of understanding that is if two people look at the same painting, and one thinks it's beautiful and the other one thinks it's horrible, right? the painting is the painting, despite what anyone says about it. It simply is what it is. So everything is in a state of suchness, right? And the tendency we have to put our own opinion in, no matter how subtly, is really, really strong. And that's what it's pointing to. And, you know, once again, when you read a line like that, I mean, nobody reads a line like that says, oh, sure, I got it. Clear as a bell, right? It's really something for contemplation.
Thank you. And we have one person echo. If you unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Hi, Harry. Thank you for the talks. Really wonderful again listening to your talks. I just want to follow up with this question about this last line, right? I remember during the last retreat that Shifu actually led in DDRC. It is a silent illumination retreat. I believe it's 2006 at the time. And I think he used this particular passage, encourage all of us to memorize it. And the way he explained it is that all these lines, the first lines is like not arising of the deluded thoughts, right? And if you cannot do that, then it's almost like it's a digression of how we project our thoughts and how do we dilute our thoughts in a different kind of level. And then so in other words, if you are able to really at all times not arising to the deluded thoughts, meaning that you see everything as the reality itself. In other words, you see everything interacting with your thoughts, your views, senses, projections, and all, coming together. Of course, it's conditions. You see the true reality at every moment. Then you will not arising with the deluded thoughts, right? So that is the practice we're trying to achieve there. In other words, at all times, do not arising this kind of a erroneous way of perceiving all the, what we see, what we perceive, what we try to interpret, all of that. So if you cannot do that, then try not to, add another action is trying to get rid of that actions, right? And then if you cannot do that, then don't even add more and trying to understand actually what you were doing, because you're doing so ready off seeing everything in the reality itself. And then the last line is like, don't trying to argue whether this is true or not. So in other words, it's all going back to the first line at all times. Do not arising of the deluded thoughts. So in other words, just see everything as the reality itself, coming together moment by moment. Of course, it's conditions. Nothing that is, there's a concrete, absolute truth. There's no me, there's no other, there's no all that. So if you can see that continuously, practice that is what this whole passage is trying to tell us to do. So I just want to share that. Yeah.
That's really, really very helpful. It reminds me at Stu Leonard's, they have two slogans. One is the customer is always right. And number two is, if you have any questions, go back to number one. Right. So, yeah, and I just remember there's a Chinese phrase I remember, but I don't remember the Sanskrit. And I think it's Fa Sheng Le, the joy at the arising of phenomena. In every moment, right? That you are, you have this sense of compassion, of joy, of equanimity, whatever you're confronting. This is something we really try to cultivate. And, if we can see that the things that we don't like that arise all the time, and it's easy to find stuff we don't like, right? You don't have to look too far, but rather than seeing them as things that you want to get rid of, just like you were saying about how we deal with thoughts, if we just are clear that that's arising, we don't attach with our sense of you or me, any of those things. If we, we put it all to rest, like, that famous story about Sherfu when he was speaking to Shan, or I can't remember, one of his teachers. And, he spoke for, I don't know, hours and hours. And finally, his master said, "Put down." Now, that's a little bit like that thing I said about the peach blossoms, right? Anybody, I'm saying put down now to everybody. I'm saying it to myself, right? Oh, I'm totally not, but it is working. That's the thing. That's the thing to see. It is working in little increments all the time. And that's where, the faith and practice comes in. It's really quite wonderful if we just can stay with this aspirational level. And there was a poem in, I've used this before, but where I grew up in White Plains, at the coffee shop was a donut shop. And it said, "As you wander on through life, brother, whatever be your goal, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole." Right? So we have this tendency to see, oh, this is what I'm lacking. I'm just full of lack. And this idea of lack actually was something I was going to talk about, but it's really important how we really think that we're missing something, and we think we're irresponsible if we're not thinking. If we just rest with something, that might be what's called for, but usually it's, oh, I got to do something. I got to do something now. Something's wrong, and I'm responsible, and I need someone to blame, and I'm in a state of anxiety. But this state of lack that we feel, you can't find it anywhere in your mind or your body. It's really a fabrication. And, this is our practice, right? So thank you, Echo.
Sure, thank you.